You're listening to the Art of Making Home podcast with Sandro Stefanucci, a home builder with over 37 years of experience in the industry. This series shows you the construction industry from the contractor's perspective, as well as what it's like to work with the many different types of industry experts, such as interior designers, architects, and subtrades. In addition, we'll be discussing challenges that we have encountered and what other industry professionals can learn from those stories. We'll be covering such topics that many people do not consider before building a home. Like, what can your property actually allow? Is your property located on a steep hill? Where is the location? What will the municipality enable you to construct? It might not be as cut and dry as you think, so let's get the conversation started.
Hello, beautiful people. It's Sandro Stefanucci from Abstract Homes and Renovations. And today we have world famous Hitesh Neb from WNDR Architecture. We are just going to discuss relationships between architects and builders, different viewpoints from either side, and kind of give our listening audience some insight to what we have to deal with internally when it comes to building with an architect. So maybe Hitesh, you can just introduce yourself and, how long you've been doing it and those kinds of things that are relevant.
Hi, everybody. My name is Hitesh. I've been a residential designer for over a decade now in Vancouver. I moved here from India, so my experience is a little bit more diversified than most people. I grew up on the West Coast and in Vancouver particularly. I grew up in India and I moved here when I was 17 years old, so it's been about 15 years since then. I started my career working with an architect in town, with Jim Bussey at Formworks Architectural, and then proceeded to form my own company, which was called Renovations Studio in the past. And I've recently just partnered with Eric Vanderputten, an architect here in Vancouver, to form WNDR Architecture and Design.
For me and my experiences with architects and designers in the past, I can't say it's always been wonderful. Typically, and the old school architects are very like, this is what you get. I draw it, you just build it the best you can kind of thing. Never really had, I can honestly say, a great communication, or I don't know, the attitude was never, you're just a builder kind of deal. So I believe it's changed now. And with you and with some of the generation that's coming up now, we have to build buildings differently. So we have to really collaborate. This is more for the customer. Because when we got design details and complicated design details, if I don't have a detail necessarily showing an overhang and those kinds of things, it can be complicated for, say, the guy framing the house and stuff like that. And how do we detail this properly to make it look and achieve the look that we're going for? So having somebody like you there, I can call you up. I can say, this is the detail I'm looking for. Can you maybe draw me up a little bit detail? And I get it. And that's what I need instead of waiting a week and a half or 2 weeks for something that I need right now.
We make it a point to really highly recommend, and this is something that we're working on with our client base in general. For clients, the value that they put into design is still just a number on a sheet for them. They don't particularly understand how much of an impact it can have on the final product in lots of ways. They're looking for like the low cost rather than the value that someone can bring to a project. So, our client base now is, most of them are committed for us to help them through the entire construction project, not just get them a permit and then let the contractors sort of take the reins from there. Committed to, having us throughout the project. In some cases, we are the prime consultant, where the client doesn't even talk to the contractor. Everything just goes through us. I think there's different ways of structuring things in Vancouver, especially with the way that the market has matured over the last 30, 40, 50 years. But, we want to be part of the process from day one to the time our clients move in. And it's not so much an ego thing. It's not so much a product of, I designed it, so build it my way. It's a product of just delivering the best product possible, given the circumstances, right? We can't know everything. We're not almighty. We can't find every single nook and cranny in the house. And we're not detailing every single nook and cranny in the house. There's always room for discussion and collaboration on site where any project is being built.
The misconception from my point as a builder towards an architect, and I just hear this understanding that it's changed, been at it for a while. So I've seen how the mentality has changed, but it's always, the architect, they charge too much money for what they do. They're always putting all this fancy stuff on here, doesn't fit the budget. You're kind of getting those types of misconceptions. And, maybe it's true somewhere with some guys, but that's why I wanted Hitesh on here to clarify some of that. We work together and to get the goal at the end. And regardless if that Hitesh is, he's actually doing it that way. He's got everything in place as far as being able to, guide people properly and look for the end goal. Like the mindset is different from the old architects from what we have now, right? So they take everything into consideration, not just their fancy design.
Okay, so I wouldn't say we have misconceptions about contractors. I think what I would call them is filters, right? So it's more about like when you talk about a contractor, you just put a filter on them, essentially saying like, well, they're going to screw up my project. They're not going to build it as per my details. It's not going to look the same. They're going to start value engineering with the client and, things like that. Those are the things that end up, they won't include us in conversations when it comes to, designing something or redesigning something just because it needs to be value engineered and all that stuff. Make decisions in isolation. Those are the kind of things that we kind of, see when we're talking to a contractor sometimes.
Right. So you bring up a good point there, but I'd like you to maybe elaborate a little bit more on the dollar value, because I think there's probably a lot of maybe misunderstanding, misconception in the general public when it comes to, well, how much does it cost for an architect and then the designer? So, they might be looking for, again, like you say, the best value sometimes, for what they're doing, not realizing that, there's a lot of detail that goes into this stuff here. And I'm feeling like we should have somebody that is actually a legit architect being able to submit plans in there, because a lot of times I'll get plans that are not complete. And it's because that the homeowner at the time when they hired the architect or designer, there was they didn't want to pay as much money. So they kind of scaled it down so they could just barely get it through City Hall and get it passed. And then I'm wondering all these different details, budget wise, it doesn't fit the budget. These things you put on the house here, like, you know what I mean? Right. So I would think maybe you can break that down just a little bit from your end and how you look at structuring your dollars when you're looking at a design.
When we first started Regeneration Designs, it was just about getting work, getting out there, doing some work, right? Like it was as simple as that. It was grassroots. Anyone who would call me, I'd entertain it. Never thought about a value proposition about the business. It was all about like, I need to pay my bills. So let's do it. Whatever you need us to do. I think as time's gone on and we've realized that if we're not bringing value to a project, I don't think we should be on it, period. Right? Like that's the whole point of having a successful design practice is if you're not able to bring any value to the project, you should really not be working on the project. Maybe this project belongs to someone else to do. And so, the way we structure our projects now is very similar to how a contractor would structure their sort of proposals or their budgets in lots of ways. So we base our fee on a percentage of the construction cost that we estimate. And our estimates based on what we're hearing in the market, and the data that we're getting from our professional organizations like the AIBC and RAIC. And then we base that using a fee tariff that the AIBC also publishes. In the past, we've kind of discounted our fees because we weren't a registered architect, but now with Wonder, we're a registered architect. There's a whole bunch of different responsibility that comes with it, liability insurances and all that stuff. So I think we're bumping up that sort of percentage, but that's really how it's sort of put together. And really what that percentage allows us to do, if the value of the house exceeds what the value that we originally estimated, what it does, it gives us time to be able to design something to that value of the house. Just because a client decides to spend more shouldn't mean that we don't get an opportunity to work on a better project, right? So our fees are based on project values now in lots of ways. One of the other things that I always tell my clients, and I've been very sort of astute about this over the last couple of years, is that if you don't think you're going to like me, there's no point in working with me. It's like getting into a relationship, right? Like, Sandro, you've been married for a long time, and I've been with my partner for about a decade, and it takes a lot of work, patience, right? And you need to get to know each other, and you need to obviously be able to understand each other. So, and I feel the same way with my clients in lots of ways. It's an actual relationship, because if you don't work on it, it's not going to be healthy for anyone.
The relationship, I think, is a super important function for the architect and builder, regardless if you say like, okay, so you've done the design and stuff like that. So from my standpoint, it's like, I don't want you just like, be able to finish up a set of plans, get them to City Hall, get them passed, and then you're done kind of thing. I want you through the whole project until it's finished. That's what I need from my standpoint, because there's always, like you say, you're not designing every nook and cranny of a job. So there's a lot of stuff to look at even after the fact. Even though plans are done, we still need collaborate. We need to mesh too. Like you say, you also have that relationship with your customer. I have to have that relationship with you as the architect, and you with me, trust each other and actually kind of feed off each other. And how do we get this to where we need to keep it in budget and so forth, that, that kind of thing, and be able to trust each other in what we're doing.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, no matter how it's set up contractually, at the end of the day, I see my responsibility to the end product, to the client, right? And I think in that way, our relationships with our contractors, the best ones at least, are who share that same value proposition with us, right? I think if we're both working towards, the same end goal, it makes it a lot easier. Really what it is educating our clients from day one. It's about telling them what the value this is going to bring, right? Because just as an example, Sandro and I went to talk to a client recently, right? Their concern was, if there's two people involved in the project throughout construction, who's going to be the boss, right? And really the answer to that is there's no boss. It's a collaborative effort, right? You're the boss. You make final decision, right? Like as the client, you're the boss. Like there's no other boss really. Sandro manages the project on site, and I am there for support when it comes to any design decisions. Also, I want to be on site to make sure that whatever we've designed is being executed the way that we designed, right? So we're protecting the client in some way, but also providing support to the contractor to make sure they're lost. Like we don't want anyone to not know what they're doing, right? And that's kind of why that relationship is so important. That should go to the end, essentially, right? The project should be finished with the designer and contractor on board. When the keys get handed over to the client, ideally the contractor and the designer should do it together because they've put the whole thing together.
Again, I think it's just a matter of one meshing with all people together. Builder, architect really have to get meshed together. And again, there's not everybody, you're not going to fit with everybody. So that's just the way it is.
We manage our expectations from day one. And I think we do that in a way that is important to recognize, including all the stakeholders, essentially, the clients, the contractor, the subconsultants to a certain degree, and us as the architects and designers, right? So, when you know that you don't get along with someone, you just acknowledge it and then keep the relationship super professional. And like, if someone can be professional, they shouldn't really be in the industry, right? So you got to rely on people to be professional at least. Like if you like someone, you can go out for a beer and discuss it over a beer. But if you don't like someone, maybe it's just a memo or an email that goes out.
Yeah. So teamwork makes the dream work, right?
That's true. That's true.
Well, Hitesh, man, this has been great. Really enjoyed our time together. We will have a link if you guys want to talk to Hitesh up on the podcast. And also, if you want us to get together and build you something great, Hitesh can design it. We can build it for you. Take care, guys.
Thanks, Sandro. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of The Art of Making Home with Sandro Stefanucci from Abstract Homes. Make sure you keep following every episode to learn his advice about the building industry here in the Lower Mainland. He will have great tips on following episodes when it comes to building or renovating your home. Make sure to follow us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and of course, Apple Podcasts, so you don't miss his latest construction advice. If you want more information on Abstract Homes, all you have to do is go to their website, abstracthomes.com. Talk to you next time.